My brother Erasmus, he's not a good person, and that's coming from me. I just think he deserves everything he got. Well, when he left me and my father and just moved far away, you guys aren't gonna believe, after all this time apart, what made him come crawling back into our lives. Let me tell you. Although I wish you had not. I know that many of you have gone through similar situations to mine in your lifetime. I say this because of everything that's happened lately, but I won't make the same mistake as I did with my friends when I tell you my story. So I'll tell you the context first. Ever since I was born, I've been a country farm boy. My father raised us and my brother that way. My mother left us when I was a baby, and from then on, the closest thing we had to female figures was the wives of the other farm workers, who would sometimes go and give their husbands lunches, and occasionally give me and my brother some dessert. Although my idiot brother almost always turned it down. My brother, Erasmus, was a very strange boy throughout his life. In confidence, my dad tells me that he changed a lot when Mom left. I was only 3, but he was 6, so he was more conscious of having known her better. He tells me that Erasmus changed his personality 180 degrees, now being one of those super distrustful people who prefers to do everything by himself. He became a quiet boy, and to this day, there have been few times when he's been excited or happy without a beer in his hand. Anyways, growing up next to him was difficult for me for many reasons, whether it was work or lack of a mother or simply just the differences and the taste that we had. Well, I liked to paint, but he liked to break things. I liked animals, but he preferred to watch animals on TV because he said that at least they did not smell bad there and that they only left the shots where the way they were looking really pretty. And as I said, while I did not like the hustle and bustle so much, he loved to go to town and party from Thursday until the early hours of Monday morning. Obviously, this created a lot of problems with Dad, who would tell him that he could not neglect his chores. Now, this is the complex part, since from one time to another, when he came of age, Erasmus went through another change, but a curious one. That is, he remained with the same quarrelsome attitude he had, but he had become more efficient at work. He would get up early, check the inventory and the crops, and by 4 o'clock he had everything in order, sometimes even helping me with my chores, and of course by 6 o'clock, we had to forget about him because he would just go to the plaza with his friends to party in vans and girls in light clothing. Anyways, it was his life. And when we understood that as long as he did his work well, he could continue like that without harming himself, we decided to just leave him alone. I'd say we decided, because being more, constant in time before the change of attitude, I did just become kind of right hand of Dad, which was very shocking for Erasmus, considering that there was favoritism. But I ask you, in a situation like that, isn't it normal to have a favorite? Maybe what I'm saying sounds bad, but that's what happened, and a farmer can't afford to fail. Anyways, I start writing all this because my brother texted me a couple days ago, saying he wants to talk about things over at the farm. Well, this causes me particular annoyance because I have not heard from my brother in exactly 10 years. This year makes a decade since he left home because of a tantrum of titanic proportions, and I'm not kidding about that, because there were even legal disputes about it. It turns out that there was a time when my dad had a very serious illness. And I mean very serious. About 11.5 years ago, when he was bedridden for weeks and whose diagnosis only got worse. It was a delicate time for our family, so much so that funeral arrangements were even made, and my father started talking to his lawyer about his will. Now, I don't know about you, but being present at someone's side when they're writing their will is a horrible sight and feeling. One of the worst I've ever had in my life, and I feel like my brother went through it in the background too. My father was bedridden with his lawyer writing everything down, and he said he was leaving the farm to both of us equally. It was also a strong period because sales were not quite right. I mean, it was around 2013 when the economic crisis hit us all hard, and we had to make some nervous sales to avoid bankruptcy. Anyways, I'll update you guys soon enough. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. So today's story is a lot different than the ones we normally cover. This one, first of all, takes place on a farm, and this family is very, very close. However, we're about to learn a lot of things in the upcoming updates, and I hope you guys are having a great day. If you're enjoying this sort of story, go ahead, subscribe to the channel for daily videos, and let's just jump into update number 1, shall we? Sorry, yesterday I had to do some things, and I ended it abruptly. However, as I was saying, at the time my dad was afraid because he knew that was, well, about to happen. So he preferred to prepare for us for the worst. So he left us to farm, and that's when I started the fights with my brother. Privately, we would argue about it because he said that the farm was on its last legs, and that it wasn't even worth keeping it. We talked about selling it or investing our last savings into it, and those were unpleasant arguments because we needed each other's consent to do anything with it. In one of those discussions, we got to Dad, who was still quite delicate, and we began to put the situation to him as best as gently as we could. He was a little disappointed in my brother for telling him that he had lost faith in the family business, even though it was just a bad time, and that our greatest grandfather had suffered something like that during the Great Depression, but that he was still able to emerge stronger than ever. This comparison drove my brother crazy. Well, it inspired me, but he told Dad that he should just get out of the place as soon as possible to make real progress. Anyways, my father said that we had to keep the farm no matter what, and that's when the biggest disaster of our whole life struck. The fire. One night, during a very hot season, the farm, for some strange reason, it began to catch fire, burning much of the outer structure, but somehow managed to keep all inputs and livestock quite protected. A miracle happened that day. It started to rain, so all the external layers of the farm began to evaporate, and as we did everything possible to solve the situation, I feel that in the end, well, it ended up being a miracle. Now, this fire event happened so fast, and there are a lot of loose ends to it. Not that I want to place blame, but I found Erasmus' behavior during much of the incident very, very strange. Let's see. I remember it all like it was yesterday. After one of the thousands of arguments we had with Dad, to the point of deciding sometime later not to do it in front of him anymore, so as not to deteriorate his health even more, Erasmus ends up very upset with the both of us. He left his car, and we thought that he would not be showing up until the lunch the next day. That's when the fire started, coincidentally. I don't want to point fingers, I don't. But, come on, there's a reason I say this, and this is because Erasmus always, and I say always in capital letters, kept a tinderbox inside the glove compartment of his car. He didn't even used to smoke much, so the lighter was just in case it was needed in case of emergencies or any other eventuality that required a lighter. Anyways, the next day when I went to his car, the lighter was gone, and it was very rare for that to happen. It'll sound like a small thing, but trust me, it wasn't. He did not show any signs of life until a day later when the fire was out. He never answered the phone, and the guards at the gate said they saw him leave long after the last time I saw him leave the house, as if he had made a stop before he left. Are you going to tell me all this doesn't sound extremely highly suspicious to you? I know it's wrong to doubt my brother, but at the time I did not see it that way. We agreed not to tell Dad because we knew that such a big excitement like that could absolutely wreak havoc on his system. It wasn't easy. But the other employees helped us when, well, he started commenting on the scorched smell nearby. But we would tell him it's one of the neighbors burning crops to make way for new land. Another suspicious thing about Erasmus is that after that moment, he automatically became defensive, saying that now all the more reason we should sell, since the farm was worth far less than it used to be. Somehow this reached my dad's ears, and it was then that he showed me one of the most curious facets. Tycoon, above all else. Are you ready for this? In just 1 week, he took it upon himself, being sick and all, to sell part of the farm in the form of shares, which another company would be accepting without haggling. He decides to give half of the shares to each of us, and that's when Erasmus came to jump with happiness. It was not little money. The insurance covered a large part of the losses, so we ended up with a small fortune that ended up benefiting him because he was, able to have enough collateral to start his own business in the big city. Of course, not before he had to declare a few things because more than one of my dad's employees accused him of being the one who started the fire. The truth is, I was on their side. I really can't describe enough how bitter that time was, as a series of small trials began that pushed Erasmus' patience to the limit. But the more we went on, the more it was proven that he was the real culprit of everything. However, it got to such an extreme point that my dad felt he could leave at any time. And the last thing he wanted was to leave with a stained memory that his son hated him in his last days. So, he gave him the compensation money and let him go. And Erasmus, like the good son he was, left without saying goodbye, and he was stubborn, and you know what? I don't blame him. But to have left us like that, I feel was never the right solution. And now, 10 years later, the prodigal son shows up again, wanting to get back involved in the family business, or at least that's what I feel's happening, since he recently did an interview and ranked our farm as the second most profitable and prolific business in the entire state for a little less than half a century. Oh, the twists and turns of life, says my old dad, who by the way can stay with us to this day because of the miraculous recovery he made. Yeah, sure, he lost 2 fingers on his left hand and now walks with a cane, but he says he prefers that to being manure for the farm. Still, with all that and his miraculous recovery, Erasmus never showed any signs of life. I only learned that he moved to another state a few years ago and started a family there, without ever resuming contact with us. My father never bothered to meet him again or hear from him. He told me that he had no time to waste, as the work was too much, and no wonder. The company that bought the farm managed to help us too much, and that they were such kind people they even allowed us to buy the farm back, as they were diversifying their branches of work and they were not going to operate with us anymore. After that, it was just profits for Dad and me, until about a month ago when the farm came to a net worth of $1 million. Our first million was something we could not believe. That's when he came along, of course, in a vlog post dedicated to the investments and such. We were interviewed last month and the company's earnings were announced, and coincidentally 2 days later, after a decade of not showing his face, a wild Erasmus has appeared, saying he wants to talk and meet with Dad and me. He never even bothered to find out Dad's health status, so I find it very hypocritical to feign interest now. Of course, not that's the reason he decides to come, but what else would it be? That's a lot of coincidences in such a short time period, and now you know why I'm so upset. I'll wait to see what my brother wants with us, and if his intentions are indeed good. Update number 2. I hate to be right. Erasmus just left, but the things that happened in that room are almost unforgivable. As I suspected, he came to ask us for money for his business, knowing that the farm is now profitable, but not before showing us his new family. Yes, he got married and had 2 kids, which we knew nothing about, and out of nowhere they showed up just to meet Grandpa. According to him, that whole meeting was for Dad to meet the family, but he would not say anything else about it, and his wife seemed like a nice woman. The kids were adorable, but when he, Dad, and I went to the office, the bitter moments began. First, he made some pretty horrible comments about me, seeing that Dad and I were now sharing an office. He had to correct him, telling him that I was now the majority shareholder and the owner of the farm as such. He told him that in the will we were listed as receiving the farm half and half, but Dad replied that was 10 years ago, when he was only a few steps away from death, but much had changed by then. Well, it gave me satisfaction when Dad said, if you've been here with us, buddy, you would have seen all the changes that's taken place. And Erasmus went pale. He began to deflect the conversation, saying that there's no need for rudeness, and he understood the predicament that he left us in. And he was very, very sorry for it, in fact. He never talked about the fire, but he did let it be understood that he left a key moment to understand that he had fact-caused it. As it all progressed, he would try to redirect the issue to end up with, we were so afraid of. Dad, I've been doing so well in the company, and I wanted to know if I could get some money to come up. Please do it for the family. Sure, Now it's our turn to give to him when he took enough from us in the past and used the family that he made to blackmail us. He didn't even have the balls to come all the way here on his own, bringing that poor woman and those kids just as an emotional bait. My father later confessed to me that he was even going to offer her to work there with us, but at the last minute he got cold feet, and thank goodness, because if he did, the conversation would have gotten even more heated. We both told him that we could not give him money just like that, as we weren't a charitable foundation. Only we know how much it cost us to get there, and if he had at least shown signs of life during the last 10 years, then the story would have changed. But you know what? That's not the case. And now we have to say goodbye. Sorry, but goodbye. He stared at us dumbfounded, expecting us to repent at any moment, but you know what? We didn't. Instead, he insisted, and Dad starts to yell at him, telling him everything that he held back all those years about loving him as a son. Loving him completely, but it got to the point where he started hating him as a person for abandoning us. Erasmus just turned and walked out of the office, and I tried to follow him, even though my dad said not to, and when I saw him, he was crying. I tried to confront him, but he seemed to be frustrated, as if his plan had to work out for sure. When I tried to talk to him, he told me to give it up, as he hated me and my dad for being selfish. I swear I almost punched him right in the face, something I've been putting up with for many years now, but I held back, only he did not. He told me that now that we had a dream life, we could walk away from him, and just like that. He told me that he had regretted many of his decisions in life, and by the time that he knew all this, he felt it was too late to apologize. That's why he came now, because knowing that by now we already had so much money that getting rid of some of it for him wasn't going to make a big deal. But that wasn't the case. You can't abandon your family and come asking for money. And when I told him that, he took it very, very, very bad and looked me dead in the eyes. I didn't remember his eyes being so dull, and that being that he was crying, I would think that they would be bright. What's more is the last time I remember seeing him in the eyes like that was when he left years ago, when he made a haughty face, thinking that he had gotten away with leaving with the money at the time, and he said to me, "I understand, but you better be careful." Well, when I asked him what the heck that meant, he didn't say anything else. He just left the site, that was it. I'm afraid of what he actually might do, because my brother's not the kind of person to sit idly by, and he would just look for a way to get away with it. This one did not work for him, though, but I know there'll be something else. I haven't heard from him in a few days now, and he doesn't answer our messages, so I feel like he must have gave up. Update number 3. I just got back from the station, and boy, it's been a strong week. I don't even know where to start. I'll start from the end of the last update. Erasmus left the site with his family almost without saying goodbye, even though the kids wanted to see the rest of the barn, but a day later, we received notification that something had happened. I was asleep by then, and it was 11 o'clock, and that day had been a day of death, because of all the physical work that the day entitled. That's right, despite having $1 million farm, you still have to break a bone or two every day. But at the night, when everything was relatively quiet, we heard something like a kind of scream. When I was coming out of my room, my dad was already coming down the stairs, and I grabbed the shotgun, and we left in the truck. Even though Dad could not get that fast, we were followed by some guards, and found signs of fighting near the farm. With a small wisp of smoke, when we saw the farm, my guard dogs were there barking at one of the windows. I explained. A few years ago, we had some animals stolen, so I decided to keep some guard pits around. They love the farm animals and have helped us a couple of occasions with burglars. They don't bark at anyone on the farm and the surrounding area, but of course, since they didn't know Erasmus, it was obvious that they were going to attack. We found him holding on to one of the window gates with one hand desperately shouting various swear words and curses at my dogs. He was covering one hand, and I thought the worst, that one of the dogs had done their magic. You know, they were very well trained, and they wait in the dark without making a sound. That was one of those nights where I felt that they were a good investment. So I sent the dogs away, and Erasmus was able to fall. Already, with his other hand cramped, he rested his body hand on his belly, and before he could explain to us what happened, he was just asking for medical help, as he felt like he was going to pass out. However, instead of doing the same, we took him in one of the vans to the hospital, as we felt it would be quicker that way. He just kept repeating that he was going to kill my dogs and that this wasn't going to stay this way. Already, when the blood loss was greater and he was pale, he began to cry, saying that the farm belonged to him. This was too pathetic of a scene. But even so, it brought a few tears to my dad and my eyes. We called his wife, and she was surprised, as she thought Erasmus was originally going alone for one of his famous nights out with the boys. But oh no, he went all the way to the farm on some unfinished business he needed to complete. Within hours, a rather delicate process was begun to see if they could save his finger on his hand. As he received rather severe bites, they were deep enough to go from end to end. Now, the curious part of all this was that we inspected the place where Erasmus was that night. Oh, do you know what we found? A nearly new blowtorch, full and about to be used. Or maybe he did use it, because I remember there was smoke that day when we arrived. When I presented this to Dad, believe me, he was not happy at all, and that's when I made a little confession to him. I told him that we had to take this to the police, but when he replied that they didn't want to touch to the point to avoid any inconvenience, I confessed to him what Erasmus told me about us being careful because we had not given him part of the farm. It was then that I made a report to the police saying that we would have to be on the alert in case something such as a fire happened, since Erasmus was going to be in the eye of the hurricane for the same thing. Of course, this time was a bit simpler, because we knew that he was the one who was going to cause everything, even facing a trial. Few things have made my stomach churn as much as seeing Erasmus bruised up coming out of the hospital to start giving statements to the police station. Well, even one of his hands was in a cast, and I didn't know if he had kept his fingers or not. I honestly did not think it was appropriate to ask. I just came back, and well, for the second interview, and it was quite decisive for what it was going to be. This will have to go to trial. One of the caretakers began to relate that he had found part of the small fire that day, and while putting it out as if Erasmus must have jumped in to go straight to the farm. But even though the damage was minimal, still it's something to consider. Also, having been in the spotlight since before with the warning to the police, well, that doesn't leave Erasmus in good light, does it? A lot of the unfinished business from the encounters a decade ago about the previous fire began to be uncovered. And if this keeps up, well, let's just say that having a brother behind bars isn't something I ever thought I'd experience. In the meantime, it's up to me to be, the one to comfort my sister-in-law and the kids. As they're asking too many questions about it, I did not know how this is going to end. But I only hope that justice will prevail this time. Oh, and I'll answer what a friend who's aware of the situation asked me, as she told me that some of you would be interested to know. But no, my dogs are not in trouble, as they were only defending the property of mine. Although the cops told me that I had not warned them about Erasmus, he might have gotten off scot-free because he still belonged to the family that owned the property. Well, you do you. Final update. What's up? I hope you guys are doing well. This is going to be a very short update. I'll just tell you that's, what we did with Erasmus. We were able to get him arrested to face justice for everything he committed. Well, yes, we went to trial after all, and not only did we win this particular case, but it was concluded that he was the one who caused the fire years ago. There's good news to this whole story, but I'll go with the bad first. Not having full bail, my brother was unfortunately sentenced to 4 years in jail. It was going to be 6, but my father, just because of our family history, decided to ask for the sentence to be reduced. The bail could not be paid because of the clear economic problems Erasmus and his family had, so we decided to leave it at that. Oh, and another bad part. After the operation he had on his hand, he unfortunately had to have 2 fingers amputated from his right hand. Almost the same as my dad, ironic, isn't it? Maybe he'll pay for a stay in a jail cell, but the empty space in his head will haunt him forever. On the bright side, right? We adopted his family. My sister-in-law and her kids are now integrating into our day-to-day lives at the farm. It's not easy for them, but they tell me that at least they have lives that are better, and they're living better than before. The children miss their dad, of course, but they're still young to know the truth about why he won't be back for quite some time. In itself, the situation also gives me pain, but I swallow that feeling and then understand that I have to go out with my head held high for this business. And my dad feels the exact same. Luckily, our finances are on the upswing, and it doesn't look like it's going to be changing anytime soon. That does put my mind at ease. Also, after the yelling we three had, I think the worst part for Erasmus was when Dad told us that I was the one who would keep the farm after his death. I do feel gratitude, I do. And I thank the old man for this. But trust me when I say that I would change this for a good relationship with my brother. I mean, what was this guy expecting? Why did Erasmus, after all this time apart, think that he can just waltz back into the life and be like, hey, I'm here to inherit half of the profitable farm. Even though I abandoned you guys and ghosted you all those years ago, here I am, so give me what I deserve. I think it was absolutely ridiculous, and it just showed you what exactly type of person Erasmus was when he later on was arrested for trying to use a blowtorch and go to town with, well, the barn. Luckily, those dogs took care of him, and how ironic he ends up losing 2 fingers, just like the father that he abandoned. Guys, I want to know your thoughts on this story because it was wild, it was insane, and it was a different family story than we usually see. So let's go ahead, discuss it down below in the comment section. My name's Mr. Reddito, and I narrate stories like this every single day. So if you guys want to be a part of these day-to-day readings, all you have to do is subscribe. I'll see you guys tomorrow, and of course, just remember, it's cool to be kind. See ya.